if you're trying to make up your mind whether you want to put a detainment bund in or a wetland in, ideally you're actually going to be using both. So with the detainment bund itself, it pulls that water, the sediment then drops out, and that takes with it anything that's bound to that sediment, and then it stays on your land. You can have these detainment bund structures further upstream than the likes of your wetland. Ideally, what you're going to be using a detainment bund is to stop the sediment or the high water flow going through the wetland. Because if you have that high sediment going into your wetland, then that's just going to clog it up. What we're talking about here is a whole catchment-wide mindset. So everyone working together for a common goal, and that is to keep all of our waterways like clean in whatever way. So we want swimmable rivers. So whatever we're doing here in the Mangaone West catchment means that it's then something that further down the catchment they don't need to deal with.
Hello, kia ora. I'm Anna.
And I'm Callum from Conservation Amplified.
And you're listening to the People Helping Nature podcast.
Our mission is to make conservation mainstream, one topic at a time.
Water quality is a big topic in our rural areas, especially on farmland. And farmers are doing amazing work to protect and improve our waterways. And today we're really excited to be joined by Laura Simpson from the Mangaone West Catchment Group to talk about detainment bunds and how they're being used for some really critical issues on farm. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you. Hi, guys. Lovely to see you. Lovely to talk to you.
So, hey, Laura, would you like to start by introducing the Mangaone West Catchment Group and what you do there?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Mangaone West Catchment Group, it is a small catchment group, or by small, I mean 7,000 hectares worth of catchment. And this catchment itself, or the catchment group, was started in 1999 by a group of local farmers. And the reason they started it is that they were concerned about the pest numbers in the area as well as the stream quality. So since then, we've had a lot of work that's gone into the area. It's been supported by the likes of Horizons Regional Council, New Zealand Land Care Trust, and a few other people like MPI. And more recently, we've joined in with the Manawatu River Catchment Collective, and the crew there, the committee, as well as the coordinators that are in place, have been really influential in helping us get the programs and continue to do what we're doing. So my role in the catchment is the catchment coordinator. It's a volunteer role. I also work full-time, and at the time that I took on this role, which was in 2022, I was actually studying as well, so I didn't have a lot of time. So hence why I said before, with the catchment collective and those coordinators being really, really helpful to keep us going with our projects. So yeah, I'm really proud of the guys that have been working for the last 25 years. It's looking fantastic out there.
Can you please describe your catchment a little bit for us, especially what the landscape looks like?
It's about 7,000 hectares, and it runs from a township called Halcombe. So that's to the west of Fielding. If people don't know where Fielding is, that's really close to Palmerston North, so the lower North Island. The Mangaone West stream, so that runs from, like I said, around Halcombe. It runs down through farmland, and then the confluence with the Makino stream is down just southwest of Fielding at a place called Alhuri Forest Park. So it's also known as Kitchener Park. That then goes out into the Aroa River and then out into the Manawatu out to the coast. So yeah, like I said before, farmland, so partial farming, beef, a little bit of deer, one piggery and a dairy farm, as well as some small block holders, so lifestyle blocks.
So really, like, your catchment is somewhat further up from the Manawatu, but you have catchments that go into other catchments that flow into other catchments that then flow out to the sea. So then you come together into collectives so that all the tributaries of the main river can work together rather than being in silos?
Yes, absolutely. So I figure that if we can do our little part, or our big part in this little part of the world, then what we do here can have a positive benefit on what's happening further downstream.
So we'll get into some really cool mahi that you do in a moment, but I just want to set the scene. So when heavy rainfall occurs, what problems does this cause in your catchment?
So we have had, probably back in 2022, 23, when we actually joined in with the Manawatu River Catchment Collective about that sort of time, and that I took over from the role, we were having these really localised downfalls where basically thunderstorm type downfalls. And what was happening there was a huge influx of water coming down the catchment, and it was essentially doing flash flooding. And what it was doing was it was running across farmland, yes, but it was also creating a situation where those flash floods were hitting town infrastructure. And by town, I sort of mean culverts as well as roads, quite a significant road that comes from Fielding out towards the west there. And so that was shutting that road. When it comes to these downfalls on land itself, so the water hits the soil and then it or with the soil type that we have, it's not overly free draining and it just hits the top of the surface and it runs off from there. So hence why we have like this continued like high flash flood type scenario.
Right, yeah. Because your soil type's going to make a big difference in how rainfall affects the land and what happens downstream to the infrastructure, right?
Yeah, so it's not overly free draining here. It's called overland flow. So your sediment, your nutrients, and anything that's part of that water is going to be carried down out into the water from the land.
So to mitigate that, you put in retrofitted detainment bunds as a practical and effective solution. And we'll get how that exactly works. We get onto that in a moment. But can you just take us on a journey how you identified the problem and then the solution and how you got to the detainment bunds?
So back in 2022, we had a meeting with the catchment, and what we talked about there was obviously the work that we've been doing, but then where we want to go from here. And one thing that was identified is even though one farmer within the block was doing their own water testing, we didn't have catchment-wide water testing. So we decided to start a program of that. What the results were then showing is that we had quite high sediment load as well as E. coli and phosphorus. So that was sort of set right, this is what's going on. So what are we going to do about it? At about the same time, one of the coordinators, they went to Massey University's Catchment Solutions workshops, and they were talking about these things called detainment bunds. So they were identified as something that not only reduced sediment and phosphorus, etc., going out into the waterways, but it also helped to reduce these flash floodings. And so that's why we sort of thought, hey, this could be a really good solution, and let's have a look at what's going to be, what are the steps involved to get one of these detainment bunds in our catchment.
So what does a detainment bund actually do?
What they are is they're a structure in the landscape. And, we can use the word dam to kind of explain what it looks like, but the water doesn't stay there for the entire time. So what is happening? So if you think about the walls of the dam or the bund structure, that has a culvert that goes downstream in it, and then there's a riser that's attached to that. That riser, think another culvert, but it's a shorter culvert, and it goes straight up, and it has a hole at the top, so it's got an open end at the top, and then at the bottom it's got a hole that has a plug in it. And that type of plug, that's up to design at the moment. So there's a few little designs that are going on there. Some can be remotely controlled, so you can release and close them at time, or you go out there and you sort of pull a bit of a lever in a pulley system that opens and closes the hole. So that hole is shut, or the bund is put in place when there's water going to be coming. So if you look at weather, like most of us do, you think, okay, that looks like it's a big rainfall event. So you go out and you close the bund. Then what happens with the rain event? So the rain obviously comes down, it comes down through the catchment, off the hill slopes, it goes into the structure. The water is then slowed down. In a big event or in a major event, the water goes up through the top of the riser and then it goes down through the culvert and continues downstream. But what's also happening at the same time, like I said before, is that the water is halted or it's slowed down. That water then stays there for about 3 days. And that time allows for deposition of the sediment. And so the sediment drops out of the water. After that three days, you can pull the plug and then it goes back downstream, as well as there's no water that's left on that part of the pasture, if it is in pasture or hill or slope. So by pasture, I mean that this structure doesn't impact your production as a farmer, and you can still use that area to graze a few days later.
I feel like that makes a lot of sense, but just so I'm understanding correctly, when there's good weather, there's no rainfall, you would leave the bung on it open so that the water just flows through normally. And then let's say you see a storm coming, you would then close the hole in it at the bottom so that the water level has to actually rise above, I guess you would call the dam wall, or rise above the edge of the bund. And then it has to flow over the riser, so that way it slows down the water flow so you don't damage the infrastructure downstream. But then you can let the sediment sit, and then once you're happy that things have dried out a bit, you then just let it flow afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose with the riser, that's sort of back from the bund wall. And it's not as high as the bund wall. So the riser sort of acts as almost like a little bit of a drain before. Ideally, it's not going over the bund wall. I suppose in massive events it still does. But yeah, it is designed so it's just slightly lower so that the water goes out through and continues.
You're using retrofitted detainment bunds, and I'm mindful that there's quite a bit of terminology here, but why would you retrofit one instead of just building one into your landscape?
So when we looked at these detainment bunds, we got in touch with the crew at Detainment Bund Consultancies. They did a GIS model, so Geographical Information System, so mapping software to look at areas that could have these detainment bunds in place. So what you're looking for is an area where the natural landscape pinches the water flow anyway. So that means that you've got less infrastructure or soil to move, so it's not so much of an impact on, like I said before, your farming or your general on-land activities. So when we were going through that process, or when they were going through that process to look at the areas that could be suitable for these detainment bunds, what they found are all of these stock dams that are no longer in use. So these farmers now have put in their own water systems. So they've got their water troughs and things like that that aren't supplied by these dams anymore. So there's these dams sitting there, and we thought this could be a really good opportunity to use something that's already in the landscape and potentially a way for reducing the cost of setting up these detainment bunds.
That makes a lot of sense if you already have something in place that is similar enough. So one question that really boggles me a little bit is like when I think of farmland and of, flood mitigation and all of that, I always think of fences, stream plantings and wetlands. So why use detainment bunds over wetlands?
Yeah, really good question. So I think the thing here is that it depends on what you want and what the goals or the outcomes are desired. Ideally, you're going to be using all of those mitigation methods, right? So you're going to have your riparian planting, you're going to have your wetlands as well.
So what happens on a scientific level once the water has been slowed behind the detainment bun versus what would happen in a wetland?
If you're trying to make up your mind whether you want to put a detainment bund in or a wetland in, ideally you're actually going to be using both. So with the detainment bund itself, it pulls that water, like we've said. The sediment then drops out, and that takes with it anything that's bound to that sediment. So if that's E. coli or phosphorus or anything like that, that drops out and then it stays on your land. You can have these detainment bund structures further upstream than the likes of your wetland. So your wetland is more used, and I say more because it still does take out some phosphorus and sediment and things like that. But ideally, what you're going to be using a detainment bund is to stop the sediment or the high water flow going through the wetland. Because if you have that high sediment going into your wetland, then that's just going to clog it up. If you've got a constructed wetlands, often those have a sediment pond or a sediment trap at the start that you can dig that sediment out and then keep it clear. Whereas if you've got high water flows coming down, then that's going to go down through into your wetland and potentially cause damage or overrun it with water that you don't want there. So that's where using them in conjunction is going to be really helpful. They're kind of going to protect each other, and then you're getting the benefit of a reduction in your sediment, your phosphorus, and then coming down into your nitrogen through your wetlands. I suppose one of the reasons that we looked at detainment bunds here for the Mangaone West is more that we don't necessarily have a huge nitrogen issue through the area. So that's why we looked at a tool, an edge of field mitigation method that's going to reduce the sediment and also help with those high extreme weather events.
I like to think in concepts, so just help me to get my head around this. A wetland's like a sponge, right? And if you had high rainfall pushing all that sediment into your sponge, you're just going to clog up all the pores like a filter, I guess. And you wouldn't want to just put stuff into the filter. So this is almost like the detainment bund is like having like a capacitator, or like having something that just stops the sponge from just getting filled and that filter just just getting clogged up.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, of course, going to be cases where wetland isn't going to work. It's just for whatever reason, and vice versa, a detainment bund's not going to work. But if we have all of these methods available to us, then we can find something that's actually suitable for the issue that we have. And like I said before, we don't necessarily have a high nitrogen levels in the catchment. So we're not going to be putting something in that then reduces nitrogen. So we're more focused on something that's actually going to help mitigate with the issues that we've had identified through our water testing.
So coming back to that water testing, would you have been able to identify what's going on without that? Or is it really the crucial piece to the puzzle?
I think a little bit of both. So the thing about the catchment that's been going for so long is that we had a report done by the crew at Massey University in, I think, 2004, and that talked about high sediment loads then. So it's been an ongoing issue, and the planting itself, that's been really good, and it is helping to reduce that, but it still shows that, and to be fair, there wasn't actually water testing done back then, so we don't know the levels, if there's been a significant rate of change in the phosphorus levels or a significant amount of reduction. But what the water test has showed is that it's given us hot spots of areas that we can work on. So some areas are higher in E. coli than others have decreased in phosphorus, but slight. I did say before we don't really have a nitrogen issue, but higher nitrogen in a particular area. So that's more of a localized issue rather than a whole catchment-wide solution that we need. So that's where we're sort of looking at, yes, the water testing absolutely have been critical in showing us steps to then move forward with some projects that we're doing in catchment-wide rather than just localized on farm.
Earlier in our chat, we talked about how your catchment is one of the tributary catchments that leads into the Manawatu River. So installing detainment bunds, working on your water quality and peak water flows and sediment, how does that benefit the Manawatu River and people and waterways further downstream?
So I suppose what we're talking about here is a whole catchment-wide mindset. So everyone working together for a common goal, and that is to keep all of our waterways clean in whatever way. So we want swimmable rivers. So whatever we're doing here in the Mangaone West catchment means that that then reduces the likes of sediment or any nutrient or contaminant that we may be passing on. We're reducing that, we're keeping that up here, and then we're mitigating it and reducing it. So it's then something that further down the catchment they don't need to deal with. So the Mangaone West, it's actually a silt bottom stream. So there's not at the moment a lot of rocks. So if that's a natural thing or if that's just a combination of constant sedimentation in the stream, then we're yet to see, right? But further downstream, so our next stream, which is the Mangaone, that is a rock bottom stream. So the habitat there is critical to keep those stones bare, to create the habitat for the stream life that's going to be there. So if we as a catchment then a part of the sedimentation in that area, then I think that we have a bit of responsibility here to keep the sediment up where it belongs on land as soil, as productive soil, so people can put their pastures in it rather than having it clog up the streamway further downstream.
Totally. So would it be fair to say that really what you do at the upper areas will, if you don't mitigate correctly there, it would compound and then literally roll down the rivers, creating problems all the way out to the ocean?
Absolutely, highly likely. I think it's something that as a whole catchment-wide mindset is that we're all doing our little part in our little parts of the paradise to keep things going really well. So if we can reduce what we can, then others aren't going to be having to deal with it.
So looking into the future, what roles can you see your detainment bunds playing when it comes to climate and flood adaptation?
I think it's really important to think about that these may not be the best solution when it comes to a huge event. And by huge events, I'm talking about the likes of Cyclone Gabrielle and Cyclone Bowler. So those massive events. So they still potentially will be able to reduce things like a little bit debris because it is going to be slowing the waterways. But I think where detainment bunds sit is they sit in higher parts of the catchment in smaller areas where it's going to reduce that compounding effects. So if we can have multiple structures, it's going to have this effect where you're slowing down in stages of the water. You're taking out a little bit of sediment as it goes along, and then that's not getting out into the main streamways. So we're basically reducing the flows in these ephemeral streams. So then they're not compounding to the huge events that are happening out into the mainstream.
So, what I'm hearing is that we need a tapestry of solutions throughout our landscapes. And if we put detainment bunds all throughout the catchments that lead into the main rivers, and we combine that with repo, with your wetlands, with riparian plantings and fencing off edges and all these different important things, we can actually adapt our landscape so that when minor, but also when major storm events come, there still might be some damage, but we're so much more resilient.
Yes. So if we can reduce the flow off to the side, so into the more like sub-catchment area, then that in these main events stops that flow coming down into the main streamway. So that stream can do its thing. It can be in full flood and it doesn't have to deal with then the continuous like flows of these smaller subcatchments coming in all the way down. So we're reducing this flow into that. So we're not causing a multiple flood in multiple areas. So yeah, like I said before, it can reduce. And then after that main event comes through, so all the flood waters comes down into the mainstream, it passes through, then we can release these detainment bunds in a staged form. And then that means that you're not having this huge influx of water coming in. You just have it all in stages. So it can be a little bit more manageable, a little bit more resilient. And yeah, hopefully through the future, this is actually a way that we can help.
And if I understand it correctly, it's also much healthier water that then flows out because it had time to settle down?
Yeah, absolutely. So it doesn't have the sediment. It potentially doesn't have the phosphorus if that's an issue there. It doesn't have the E. coli if that's an issue. So it's cleaner water that's going out. So it's not then adding in all these other contaminants as well as a huge flood event.
So what are the core benefits of all of this mahi in creating healthier streams and healthier catchments?
So we talk about swimmable rivers, right? People want to swim, people want to be able to drink the water. We also come from a farming background, so that's our exports. The other thing is our tourism. We've promoted ourselves as that clean, green image. If we are not that, then that's not a good look.
I think when we talk about helping the environment and slowing water flows and sedimentation is a part of the broader topic, it's easy to really box in the benefits, but I think it's really critical to take a broad view on it. Yes, there's our export revenue. Yes, there's what premium can we charge for our beef, for our milk powder, etc. Yes, there's tourism, and I think this is coming to a tipping point where if we don't do something big, we're going to start losing that image and people are going to go elsewhere who want to go to a clean green country. But it's also how much infrastructure damage do we fix instead of just preventing? But then also being able to swim in a healthy river, being able to drink the water, being able to see the tuna in the river. How much wellness does that bring to our people, to our communities, and to our sense of identity? I'm often pretty disappointed when I go to waterways, especially close to the ocean. And I'd like to think that we can pass these benefits and more that we haven't even imagined yet on to the next generation. And it's the type of work that you're doing here that is actually causing this to change.
Yeah, I agree. I am incredibly proud of the work that's been going on in the Mangaone West for decades. And what we see is that, we've had stream health days recently. So we've had the council out and they've set some traps and then they've pulled out things like tuna. Like you see people standing there and you've got the sense of community that started from the water and people are proud of the work that they've done. There's generations here that have been working towards planting around the stream and taking care of what we do, and you see the benefits. Like I grew up swimming in the stream here, and it's great to see like if the next generation want to do that, then they can. I totally agree with the feeling proud of what we're doing, but then also the rest of catchment groups and the rest of conservation groups, and there's so much work going across the country that I think when all together it's sort of that whole team mindset.
I totally agree. What are your top tips for other groups that are looking into detainment bunds or other mitigation options for their catchment?
The biggest thing really is to do your testing or to do your community group chat. So talk about what's important in the community, what's actually the issue. Like you may think that you've got a high nitrogen level, but you've actually got something else that's going on. So you don't want to be going down the channel of finding something or putting a solution in place that isn't actually going to be a solution for the issue that you've got. Like, talk to the people around you. So talk to your community, talk to your local council, your regional councils. They've got incredible knowledge and incredible passion about what they're doing as well. Talk to your other catchments. So hopefully you're in an area that does have a catchment group, but if you're not, then you can start one. I think it's really good to have that science behind you as well. So you could start the monitoring before you put anything in place, and then that will continue for after, so then you can actually see if it's actually working or not.
Yeah, I love it. Hey, Laura, what does conservation mean to you?
It's like a multifaceted thing, right? Like, so I've talked about what I'm doing up here as part of this catchment and what the catchment as a whole has done, but you've got people across the country that are doing these really cool projects across the board. And I think that that's the main thing, is that everyone can do their little part in their own little paradise of their world. Then I think we're going to be okay. And we're going to have these really cool outcomes where you're seeing your native birds thrive. You're seeing our waterways thrive. You're seeing our bush thrive. And I think that that's what it really means to me, is that, everyone getting involved, everyone being proud of it.
I totally agree. Where can people learn more about what you do in your catchment group, and also find out if Detainment Bunds might be something for them to look at?
We're on the Manawatu River Catchment Collective webpage. So, get in touch, talk about it.
The link to the Manawatu River Catchment Collective will be in the show notes for you guys as well.
Hey, Laura, thank you so much for joining us. You had some really cool info to share. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.